It's also said that a woman's menstrual cycle should be considered a fifth vital sign. So there's actually a book called The Fifth Vital Sign that speaks about this. So your vital signs are those things that you get checked when you go to the doctor and when you go to the hospital, like your blood pressure, your pulse rate, etc. And it's said that the fifth vital sign for women in particular is the menstrual cycle. So for me, that just highlights how important our hormones are, right? Especially our reproductive hormones to indicating our health status as women. Welcome to Well with Jesus, where we do wellness Jesus way. This podcast is all about empowering you to build a wellness routine that honors God and makes you feel your best. Each week, I'll share practical tips and biblical principles to help you create a sustainable routine without the overwhelm, guilt, and spiritual confusion of many wellness trends. If that resonates with you, dear friend, I'd love for you to join me weekly. Don't forget to rate and review the show so more women can find us. Hello, dear friend, and welcome to another episode of the Well with Jesus podcast. So before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to let you know that next week there will be no episode. So I'm going to be taking a break because I am going on a trip. So there will be a 1 week break, and then after that, we will go back to having weekly episodes. So the next thing I want to do is read the listener review of the day. So this review comes from episode 4, Healing Emotional Trauma and Overcoming Victim Mentality. I actually got a lot of feedback on that episode. I think most of the comments that I've gotten were from that episode. So you guys must have really enjoyed that one. And this listener said, so healing, and this episode really spoke to my soul. So thank you, listener, for leaving that review of the episode. And I encourage you, if you have not already, to please leave a review on the podcast app that you are listening to. So that might be Apple Podcasts. Most of you guys actually listen on Apple Podcasts, or it might be Spotify, or wherever it is that you are listening. I would really, really, really appreciate you taking about 1 minute to leave a review. If you don't know how to do that, go to my Instagram or my TikTok. One of the pinned posts will be about how to leave a review. It is a screen recording that will guide you step by step on how to do that. So I hope to see your 5-star rating and review, and who knows, maybe one of these days I will be reading your review at the beginning of the episode. So today I am talking about my hormone healing journey. What were some of the hormonal struggles that I went through, and what steps did I take to start recovering from some of those struggles? So a quick disclaimer, I am a health coach, as you probably know. If you do not, I am a certified integrative nutrition health coach. However, I am not a hormone health expert. So in this episode, I am just sharing what I have learned from experts and what has worked from me, or rather for me. This is not in any way whatsoever medical advice. So now that we have gotten that out of the way, I will start with just sharing a little bit about my story and some background for this episode. So around when I started puberty, which I think was around the age of 11, I just got a bout of acne on my forehead. And when my period started, it started quite irregularly, right? In the sense that it never became a regular period from the day that I got it. And without saying too much, I've learned over time that the color of your period also actually gives you vital information about the health of your hormones. And from what I've learned looking back, what I saw indicated unhealthy hormones, basically hormones that are out of whack. So yeah, that is basically some of the symptoms of hormone imbalance that I experienced from the moment that I began puberty. And so this whole thing of having an irregular period continued through high school and also throughout university. So when I was in uni, I did go the pill, but I was not very good at taking it. And so I mentioned that because when you go on hormonal contraceptive, it actually intercepts your body's natural hormonal rhythms, right? So instead of your body, what can I say? Instead of your body excreting these hormones that are made naturally in your body is now receiving hormones from the hormonal contraceptive. So that kind of intercepts your actual hormonal system and your reproductive hormones from actually working. So essentially, you have like a pseudo reproductive hormonal system happening. So yeah, I went on the pill, and even throughout that, the pill is supposed to quote unquote regulate your period, right? But that also didn't happen for me. It continued to be very irregular, and that was probably also because I was not really taking it properly. So instead of having the breakthrough bleed, which is what you get on those white pills, I just was having it sometimes and sometimes not having it. And so throughout all of this, obviously, you guys know that I've been a wellness girly from ages ago. And so as part of being a wellness girly, I listen a lot to wellness podcasts. And so I was listening to a podcast, and on this episode, there was an expert, a hormone health expert named Elisa Vitti. I'm probably saying her surname incorrectly. She's either from Canada or America, and she's one of actually probably the top hormone expert in the world right now. And I listened to her episode, and I just did a self-check based on the information that she shared on that episode. And I realized that I had symptoms of hormone imbalance, which started making things make sense for me, right? I also realized I think maybe from that episode, but also subsequent episodes that I listened to from various other experts, that I had symptoms of polycystic ovarian syndrome. So you may have heard of something called PCOS or PCOS, which is a form of hormone imbalance. It's not a disease, it's a syndrome. You have to have, I think, at least two of the symptoms, yes, to be diagnosed. Either two or three, I'm not sure. Like I said, I'm not an expert, I'm not a gynae. But you have to have at least two or three of the symptoms to be diagnosed with PCOS. And I listened and I was like, check, right? And so a couple of years later, when I went to the gynecologist, that was confirmed. So then that also helped me realize that some of the symptoms that I had been experiencing, the irregular period, the acne, was also because not only was maybe my lifestyle not really suited towards hormone balance, but also because I had this fundamental hormone imbalance in my body that I didn't do anything to cause. It's just there. And in saying that, I'm not speaking that over myself as well. I'm just speaking about information that I have received, right? And I'm saying that because this is something that I'm also praying about over myself. So I'm not trying to negate my prayers, basically. But yeah, so I went on a journey to learn more, right? And work on improving the health of my hormones. So in this episode, I will go into discussing the changes that I made, which honestly were a lot, to be honest. But yeah, I'm going to break those down. And then I'm also now just wanting to chat a little bit about why does hormone health matter, especially if maybe you're not experiencing symptoms. Why is this something that should be on your radar? So firstly, what are hormones? As a very basic description, hormones send communication signals throughout all of the bodily systems to essentially regulate bodily functions. And some of those bodily functions include reproduction, the functioning of your metabolism, regulating your mood, etc. And so hormone health is a fundamental pillar of physical wellness and also mental wellness, just because of all of the functions in our bodies that are actually regulated by hormones, especially for women, right? As our reproductive system is such a big factor of our lives. And many of us, unfortunately, experience things like PMS and maybe PMDD, endometriosis, PCOS, all these different kinds of things. And so because this is such a commonplace experience and we live in a world that is not really geared towards optimal hormone function, I believe that this is something that all women should be cognizant of. It's also said that a woman's menstrual cycle should be considered a fifth vital sign. So there's actually a book called The Fifth Vital Sign that speaks about this. So your vital signs are those things that you get checked when you go to the doctor and when you go to the hospital, like your blood pressure, your pulse rate, etc. And it's said that the fifth vital sign for women in particular is the menstrual cycle. So for me, that just highlights how important our hormones are, right? Especially our reproductive hormones to indicating our health status as women. And so when I collected all of this information, I realized that I needed to work on my hormone health, not just for having a healthy reproductive cycle, but just for my whole body to function more optimally. So changes I made ranged across my diet, changing my personal care products. So personal care products are like the things that you use daily on your body. So lotion, your skincare ingredients, your soap, your hair shampoo, your toothbrush, your menstrual products, all of those things. And also I changed my cleaning products. Those were the major changes that I made. And my aim in making these changes was to minimize my exposure to endocrine disrupting chemicals. And endocrine disrupting is just another term for hormone disrupting chemicals. And also to eat in such a way that supported my hormones to start functioning more optimally. So in terms of the diet changes that I made, I had been eating healthily for many years at this point, but there were some things that I learned at a later stage that I could have been doing better to address some of the issues that I was noticing hormonally. So I learned that certain foods could be linked with some of the issues that I was facing. For example, there is research that establishes a link between dairy and acne. That's not necessarily universal, right? So it's not the case for everybody, but for some people, right? So I made that change for myself, and I observed that if I don't have too much dairy, it helps to lower my acne. And also, I always knew that we need to generally watch sugar intake, but through learning everything that I did and starting to implement these changes in my diet, I realized that my body's tolerance for sugar, and by sugar I mean refined sugar, so like table sugar and added sugars like honey and added sugars that are in food products and stuff like that. I realized that my tolerance for that is very, very low. So I cannot have a lot of sugar without it starting to impact my body. And one of the first ways that I see that is on my skin. And I also read and heard a lot about gluten on podcasts, that it might cause inflammation for some people, and that could be linked with your hormones not functioning so well and your skin also not functioning so well. And so I went gluten-free for about a year, but then I started reintroducing gluten just because the whole gluten-free situation was a lot. Gluten is in so many things. If you'd like, what is gluten? It is essentially a protein that is found in wheat that makes wheat nice and chewy. So you can imagine that's in bread, that's in pasta, that's in cake, everything that's made with flour, which is so many things. So I eventually reintroduced gluten just to see, does this apply for me? And I found that it does not. So now I eat gluten and it's all good. So those are some of the things that I eliminated from my diet. But if you listened to my episode around the fundamentals of a sustainable, healthy diet, you will know that fundamentally, I believe in a principle called crowding out, which is to actually focus more on adding nutrient-dense foods into your diet. And in so doing, you will find yourself consuming less of some of those things that are maybe not so nutritionally beneficial. So I focus on adding foods that are rich in antioxidants, right? So antioxidants are typically found in plant foods that are very vibrant in color, and they help fight cell damage, right? So some of the cell damage that we might experience from just environmental pollutants, things in our food, things in our water system, etc., that might affect not only our hormones, but other systems and processes in our bodies. Foods that are rich in antioxidants help to fight with that. I also focus on adding foods that help with detoxification, like radishes, dark leafy greens, fresh coriander, broccoli, etc. Just off of the top of my head, those are sources that I remember from the resources that I engaged with. I also focused on prioritizing blood sugar balance in how I ate. So looking back, I realized that yes, I was eating healthy, but I wasn't necessarily composing my meals in such a way that they stabilized my blood sugar during the day. So my typical pattern was that I would have breakfast, and then 2 hours later I would be absolutely starving. I wouldn't be able to concentrate, and I would have to go eat like immediately. And I realized by reading a book called Body Love by Kelly LeVeque, who is also a certified health coach, that those are symptoms of low blood sugar, and to address that you need to structure your food in such a way that it has adequate fats, protein, and complex carbohydrates so that your blood sugar is stable throughout the day. Right. So I also focused on doing that. And blood sugar is essentially also one of the fundamental or foundational pillars of hormone health, right? Because when we do not balance our blood sugar, hormones such as insulin, which is closely connected to our blood sugar, are out of whack, and insulin has an effect on cortisol, which is the stress hormone. And then when our cortisol spikes or it's not functioning the way that it needs to be, that then affects our reproductive hormones like estrogen and progesterone. So yeah, those were things that I focused on in my diet. And I would say that even to this day, except for the gluten, I pretty much eat this way. Not perfectly, right? Because my philosophy is not that I need to eat perfectly all the time, but these are just things that I'm mindful of most of the time. So the next change that I made was changes to my personal care products and my cleaning products. So in terms of my personal care products, I switched to natural/non-toxic products. So essentially here my focus was on really just simplifying the products that I was using in my everyday personal care routine. And at the beginning, I really just focused on natural because it was, one, more affordable, and two, just easier for me to navigate. There is so much to know if you want to really be non-toxic, which if you're like, what does that mean? It just means not using products that have chemicals in them that are known to have some sort of adverse effect on the body over time. So in particular, I was focusing on hormone disruptors. So I was focusing on using products that did not contain those. But because I did not necessarily have the knowledge to be able to look at ingredient labels on products and say, okay, I don't want to use this product because it has XYZ, I just focused on using products that were very simple. So for example, in my skincare routine, I did a bit of research and I found a brand called Skin Creamery that pretty much uses botanical formulas, right? So it uses almost entirely natural ingredients in their formulations, as far as I know. And then I would use that for a cleanser. I would use that later down the line for my lotion. But initially, I remember that I used grapeseed oil for my skin moisturizer. So grapeseed oil is super simple. It's just literally grapeseed oil in the bottle. And I did not have to worry about figuring out if it has this, if it doesn't have that. So that's what I did at first. I also went on a huge mission to change my menstrual care products because I also learned that the vaginal canal is super absorbent, right? More absorbent even than the skin on our body. And so when we're putting in products, pads, tampons that are filled with pesticides and, pesticides that are used essentially to treat the cotton during the farming, that's not so great for that area, and so that those chemicals get absorbed into the bloodstream. And so I decided that I was going to switch to using a menstrual cup. I was already somebody who used tampons, so I had the relevant experience that would help me transition to using a menstrual cup. And I also switched to using 100% organic cotton panty liners and tampons for those days when I would maybe need those. Another thing that was really awesome about switching to a menstrual cup was that it was so budget friendly, so economical. A menstrual cup is about 250 to 300 rand. And if you think about a pack of pads, I can't remember how much it costs. Let's just assume 17 rand. That you buy maybe 2 of those every month, that's like 35 rand. So over a year, how much is that? 35, 10, let's just say 350, right? So in one purchase of a menstrual cup, you get all the pads that you would get for a year, and a cup lasts about 5 years. So you're actually saving 4 years worth of pads money. So that was another reason that I decided to also buy the cup. Not only was it better for my health, simple, also gave me the convenience of not having to change my pads or tampons throughout the day. I can just do it in the morning and the evening because I also don't bleed very heavy. Sorry if that's a bit TMI. But yeah, it just was an option that just made sense for me from a health perspective and also from a budget perspective. So yeah, in terms of like my body cream, I changed to using, at first I used coconut oil, but then later I transitioned to just using shea butter. So that I still pretty much use to this day. I just buy a big tub of shea butter and that lasts me a couple of months. I actually think it's cheaper than buying lotion. It lasts quite a while. Yeah, so those are some of the changes that I made in terms of my personal care. And in terms of my cleaning products, I then also switched to firstly just natural stuff that I could find in my kitchen. It was just easier for me. It was more affordable for me. So for example, I would clean with bicarbonate of soda and vinegar, which obviously, as you can imagine, didn't smell so good, but the smell did wear off and the house was definitely clean. So that's what I did in the beginning. But then later I did transition to actually now buying products that are formulated to not have some of these harsh chemicals that typical products that we find in the store have. So yeah, in terms of other changes that I made, those were like the major changes, the ones that I just discussed, but there were other things that I also did try to be more mindful of in my daily life. So one thing that I did notice as I started to become more educated was that stress was a trigger for my acne. And with the knowledge that I had, I understood that me having acne on my face is not just an external problem, but it's a manifestation of systemic issues in my body, namely hormonal issues, as that's, what I was focusing on. And so stress, I realized, like I mentioned earlier, about the relationship between cortisol and some of our reproductive hormones, was triggering me to go out of hormonal balance and into hormonal imbalance, which then I would also see on my face through acne. So I just generally tried to be more mindful of that and to get myself together. Another thing that I was mindful of was just my sleep routine. So just honestly, off the jump, I've always been someone who has good sleep hygiene. Just because I'm not a night owl, I prefer to be up in the morning and go to bed at a reasonable hour. So I learned the importance of also having a good sleep routine, maintaining a normal circadian rhythm, which is to get up with the sun and to go down with the sun, and the importance of that as well of maintaining hormone balance. So I must say that in recent years, this has not been so much of a thing. Like my life has changed in ways that, my life has changed. And so I don't have the perfect sleep schedule anymore, but I also just don't stress myself about that, because if I'm stressing, then I'm also affecting myself through the stress. So for me, I just focus on what I can control, right? Like in episode 3, I spoke about giving yourself grace, looking at the season of the life that you're in and just adapting to that. So I don't stress about the fact that I don't have perfect sleep right now. So yeah, another big change that I made was getting out of using hormonal contraception. So around late university, I started using the Implanon, which is the implant. And when I took that out, I did have a rebound acne for a little while. So I just had this surge of acne all over my face. But after a while of making these changes and taking out the implant, I did see changes. So the aim of me taking out the hormonal contraception, as I mentioned earlier, when you go on any form of hormonal contraception, whether that's the pill, the implant, or the IUD, the one that secretes hormones, you essentially are shutting down your body's natural reproductive hormone cycle, right? And you are now relying on the synthetic hormones that you are receiving from the hormonal contraception. So because I wanted to reestablish healthy hormone function, I needed to get rid of those synthetic hormones to allow my body to now start getting back into using its natural reproductive hormones. So, yeah, I made all of these changes pretty much at the same time, right? And so I can't say which one had the biggest effect. If you know anything about scientific studies, you need to be able to isolate the effect, right, to a particular variable. You can't say that X had an effect on Y when perhaps you also changed A, B, C, Z, and X, right? So because I changed all of these variables at the same time, I can't necessarily isolate the results, right? I can't pinpoint the results that I have to a specific change, but I like to believe that all of these changes that I made worked together to help me see results. And so, what were some of the results that I experienced? Firstly, I think the biggest thing for me was that I went from having a cycle that was between 45 and 60 days to having a cycle that was between 30 and 32 days consistently every month, even to this day. I don't miss a period like I did before. And a healthy period, right, according to established consensus in the medical community, is that it must be between 28 and 35 days. So I went from having an extremely long cycle, which is really a red flag in terms of my hormone health, to having a cycle that was consistently within that window. And I did not experience fluctuations in my cycle length. If my cycle length did change, it's only after a couple of months, and it would usually only change by like a day. So that was a major, major breakthrough for me because that had never happened to me before. The second big change that I experienced was a complete clearing of the acne that I had had since I was 11. That was also major for me because, yes, I had gotten used to living with acne, but it going away, especially after that, what I call rebound acne, after I took out the implants, was just a major breath of fresh air for me. We all know how skin can really affect our self-confidence, and I had developed the emotional resilience not to allow my skin to impact my self-worth so much, but it was just a relief to be able to have clearer skin. And so even now, my skin is in a better place than it was before I made these changes. And the changes that I made, I held to them very strictly, like super, super strictly for about 3 to 6 months. And after I saw that these changes were consistent, then I started to kind of relax, most especially in my diet. Because for full transparency, eating a 100% refined sugar-free diet, 100% gluten-free diet, it was a lot. It was really a lot, and it also affected me in terms of my relationship with food. So that was something that I needed to relax so that I could also start having a healthier relationship with food. And in so doing, I do consume things that do make me have pimples, right? But for me, because I know that I am working, I am having faith to heal from PCOS, I can't expect myself to have perfect skin like the person who does not go through that and can eat whatever they want and still have perfect skin, right? So for me, I have adjusted my expectations to be able to have food freedom whilst still maintaining just healthier skin without the expectation of perfection. That just works better for me. So I saw these changes, these 2 major changes, and I was able to see that my body was just functioning better, right? And I have been able to, for the most part, sustain those changes over the years. So those are some of the results that I got from making basically a huge overhaul in my life. So in terms of you, if you are like wanting to learn a bit about this and maybe make some changes in your own life, I firstly recommend doing some learning for yourself. And I am going to put some resources, books that I read. I read a book called Woman Code by Elisa Vitti. I read a book called Body Love by Kelly LeVeque. And then I also read a book called Beyond the Pill by Dr. Jolene Brighton. So I'm going to drop these 3 books in the episode description, and I really recommend reading them. In particular, I really recommend Beyond the Pill, and then I really recommend Women Code. And then once you've read those, then you can read Body Love. But some of the stuff around blood sugar balance in Body Love is also covered in Woman Code. So yeah, do some learning for yourself, listen to some pods, read some books, and if you feel like you want to start making some of these changes to support your hormones better, then I recommend don't try to do everything at once. Like, I had the capacity to do everything at once, but I don't recommend stressing yourself out trying to change everything at once. Start small, right? You can go back, listen to episode 3 to get a framework around how you can start making some of these changes in your life. The aim of this podcast is not to stress you out with a whole lot of information about changes that you need to make, but to empower you with information and then also to encourage you to do it at a sustainable pace. Do what works for you and do it at a pace that works for you. So I am going to leave it there. I hope that this has been helpful. Let me know on social, but also please do leave a review on the podcast app that you are listening to. And of course, a 5-star rating. So I will see you in the next episode. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I pray that it blesses you and equips you to create the change that you're looking for in your life. Stay in touch on social media. It's at Well With Jesus Podcast on Instagram, TikTok, and Pinterest. And share something from today's episode on your story. Maybe it's a quote, a screenshot, or whatever it may be. I'd just love to see what's resonating with you. It'll also help the show grow and reach more women like yourself. All the resources from today's episode will be in the podcast description below, so make sure to check that out. And until next week, dear friend, stay well with Jesus.